After keeping koi fish for so long and reading their history, I asked myself, what type of koi fish was first created from a long process of selective breeding in Japan? Why am I finding out? Of course, because it is very valuable to have the first variety of koi fish in my pond. Is it a kohaku, or is it the kawarimono group, like chagoi or soragoi? However, some writings show that the first koi fish came from the karasugoi variety group. Well, let's find out the truth. Koi fish are a very popular species of carp that have been bred and kept as ornamental fish for hundreds of years. The koi keeping hobby dates back as far as 200 BC, when the magoi carp, meaning common carp, was brought to Japan from China. The magoi carp was originally bred as a food source, but people quickly started keeping them as pets once skin color mutations began appearing naturally. It wasn't until the late 19th century and early 20th century, however, that koi keeping became a popular hobby. Until then, only the richest aristocrats and royalty kept the magoi carp as ornamental pets rather than eating them. Today we all know that magoi born the group of karasugoi, like Matsukawabake, karasugoi, chagoi, soragoi, that show net pattern in their back as identity, and lateral color pattern on their belly. While the red-colored magoi become popular like higoi, sarasa carp that latter become kohaku, and also the white shiramuji. But which koi variety carries all the beauty requirements in its body to be called the koi fish? The koi keeping hobby as we know it started with the asagi koi, which was first recognized as an ornamental carp around 160 years ago. Asagi koi was often kept by the carp farmers, due to its interesting patterns, and prompted the popularity of the hobby, which led to all sorts of people keeping carp fish, not just the upper class. Shortly after the asagi had become popular, other mutations in the carp began popping up, and farmers began to keep more and more different carp fish. Of course, at this point, the farmers decided to give these fish a different name, to differentiate the pet magoi carp from the magoi carp for eating. Thus, the ornamental carp were named nishikagoi, which literally translates as swimming jewel, and basically means beautiful fish. Over time, with more and more people joining the hobby, the word was shortened to koi, which is the commonly used word nowadays. Is that so? Asagi were the first-born koi variety that called the koi carp. The asagi is one of the oldest breeds of the beautiful koi. Stoic and subdued, and sometimes even considered an acquired taste, you're sure to see this common blue-scaled koi around in a pond near you. Asagi offspring tend to be a spitting image of the typical asagi koi: blue non-metallic scales, reticulated diamond-like scale pattern, and splotches of red coloration, called hai. These appear on the gill plates, belly, and tail. These red areas can also appear on the koi's dorsal fin. The red hue that develops in asagi koi is less of a bright red, and more of a rusty color. The hai sometimes spreads as koi age. Asagi koi that have more red pigmentation than usual are called hai asagi. Another variation on the typical asagi koi is called taki asagi. These koi look just like your typical asagi, but they have an additional line of white scales between its red and blue pigmentation. Red eyes are also desired in asagi koi. While asagi koi produce many typical offspring, few are seen as perfect or faultless. This is one reason why the asagi koi are recognized as an acquired taste. In the ideal asagi koi, symmetry is favored. This oftentimes disliked requirement in koi is actually admired in the asagi lineage. The symmetry that is idealized in asagi koi pertains to their red patches. The red areas should be defined and clean from any spotting or straying of red pigment on the head or scales is recognized as an imperfection. And because the blue scales are so distinct, any patches of missing scales are very apparent and are seen as a major fault. For the ideal asagi koi, red eyes are desired. A flawless asagi koi has a perfectly white head. However, these koi most often have gray-toned heads. Sometimes the head develops red pigmentation. The koi is then considered to be a menkabori asagi, a variation of the asagi koi. As mentioned previously, asagi can be quite variable in price depending on their age and size, and variety. Juvenile asagi, like most juvenile koi, are generally quite affordable, usually below $50, while adult asagi, just as with any adult koi, will always be pricier and generally around a couple of $100s. High asagi will tend to be on the lower end of the price range, as it's not generally desired for asagi to have high extending past their lateral line, while highly sought after and more difficult to breed types like Jinrin asagi can be several $1,000s for an adult, and a few hundred for a juvenile. As with any koi, these prices are quite variable and depend on the seller and location. We encourage you to check with your local breeder or a reputable online breeder for more exact information. Be sure to purchase asagi, or koi of any type for that matter, only from reputable breeders. A reputable breeder should display their credentials on their site. You can also determine whether or not a breeder is ethical and trustworthy by checking out koi forums. Word of mouth travels fast, and koi owners are happy to provide info on both good and bad breeders. Oftentimes, cheaper koi come from large fish farms or shady operations that don't prioritize the health and well-being of the fish. Koi from non-reputable sources could be mistreated or have illnesses or parasites from being stocked with too many other fish or not being cared for properly. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.